There comes a moment in life when you must stop asking, how can I make this person understand me? And start asking, why am I allowing this behavior into my life? Repeated disrespect is one of the clearest signs that a relationship, friendship, or connection is becoming unhealthy. It is important to understand that disrespect does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is hidden inside small comments, dismissive reactions, constant criticism, interruptions, sarcasm, or the way someone makes you feel when you express yourself. A person may not openly insult you, yet they may consistently make you feel insignificant. They may roll their eyes when you speak, laugh at your concerns, ignore your boundaries, or treat your feelings as if they are an inconvenience. When these behaviors happen repeatedly, you should not continue convincing yourself that they are meaningless. One careless moment does not necessarily define a person, and everyone has moments when they speak without thinking, become impatient, or make a mistake. The important question is what happens afterward. Does the person recognize their behavior? Do they listen when you explain that something hurt you? Do they make an effort to behave differently? Or do they dismiss your feelings and repeat the same behavior again? This distinction is essential because healthy relationships are not built on perfection. They are built on awareness and responsibility. Someone who respects you may make a mistake, but they will care about its impact. Someone who repeatedly disrespects you may apologize, but then continue doing exactly the same thing. In that situation, the apology becomes another part of the cycle rather than evidence of genuine change. Repeated disrespect can also slowly affect the way you see yourself. At first, you may simply feel annoyed. Then, you may begin questioning whether you are overreacting. Eventually, you may start lowering your expectations just to avoid conflict. You tell yourself, maybe this is just how they are. You become quieter. You stop expressing certain opinions. You become careful about what you say because you already know how the other person will respond. This is where you must become conscious. Peace is not the same as silence. Sometimes people believe they have achieved peace because they stopped arguing. But if the reason you stopped speaking is because you are afraid of being mocked, criticized, or dismissed, that is not genuine peace. That is suppression. Self-respect begins when you become honest about what behavior is affecting you. You do not need to become aggressive. You do not need to insult anyone back. You do not need to prove that you are stronger. You simply need to become clear. You can say, I am willing to have this conversation, but I will not continue if I am being insulted. That sentence is powerful because it does not attempt to control another person. It defines your participation. And if the behavior continues, your next responsibility is not to repeat the same explanation endlessly. Your responsibility is to act according to the boundary you established. This is something many people struggle with. They communicate a boundary, but when the other person ignores it, they continue giving unlimited chances. Eventually, the other person learns that the boundary has no consequence. Your actions teach people what access they have to you. This does not mean you should immediately cut everyone out of your life after one disagreement. It means you should observe patterns. Look at consistency. Look at how someone behaves when they are angry, disappointed, or told no. Character becomes visible when a person does not get what they want. A respectful person does not need to agree with everything you say. They can challenge you. They can disagree with your decisions. They can have completely different opinions. Respect does not require agreement. Respect means they can disagree without trying to destroy your dignity, and you should offer the same in return. You do not protect your dignity by becoming disrespectful yourself. You protect it by refusing to participate in environments where disrespect has become normal. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop explaining yourself to someone who has already decided not to listen. You do not have to convince everyone of your worth. You do not have to earn basic respect. You do not need permission to take your own feelings seriously. When disrespect becomes a repeated pattern, pay attention, not because you should immediately judge the other person, but because your life deserves awareness. The people you allow close to you influence your emotional environment, your confidence, your decisions, and eventually the way you treat yourself. Choose relationships where honesty is possible, disagreement is safe, and mistakes can be repaired through responsibility. And if someone repeatedly shows you that they do not value your dignity, believe the pattern, not with anger, with clarity. Manipulation is one of the most difficult behaviors to recognize because it does not always look like control. Sometimes it looks like love, concern, disappointment, or even vulnerability. A person may make you feel guilty for making a decision that protects your own peace. They may become cold when you disagree with them. They may constantly remind you of everything they have done for you so that you feel obligated to do what they want. The behavior can be subtle, but the result is often the same. You begin making decisions based on their reactions instead of your own values. One of the clearest signs of manipulation is when someone repeatedly makes you feel guilty for having normal needs. You say you need space, and they accuse you of not caring. You say no, and suddenly you are selfish. You express discomfort, and they tell you that you are creating problems. Eventually, you begin questioning whether you are even allowed to have boundaries. This is where you need to slow down and observe what is happening. A healthy relationship allows two people to have different opinions, needs, and emotions. You can disagree without being punished. You can say no without fearing that affection will disappear. You can make your own decisions without constantly managing another person's emotions. Manipulation often creates the opposite environment. You begin thinking, how will they react? Before making a simple decision, You imagine their anger. Before expressing an opinion, you predict their criticism. Before setting a boundary, you prepare yourself for guilt. Your attention slowly moves away from what you actually want and toward controlling the other person's response. That is emotional exhaustion. You are no longer simply living your life. You are constantly managing someone else's emotional state. Another common form of manipulation is emotional punishment. Someone may deliberately ignore you, withdraw affection, create jealousy, threaten to leave, or become hostile whenever you refuse to give them what they want. The goal may not always be consciously planned, but the effect is still powerful. You learn that disagreement comes with a price. Eventually, you begin cooperating not because you genuinely want to, but because you want to avoid the punishment. That the distinction matters. A decision made from genuine choice is very different from a decision made from fear, guilt, or emotional pressure. You should also be careful with statements that turn love into a transaction. If you loved me, you would do this. If you cared about me, you would prove it. After everything I've done for you, how can you say no? These statements can make you feel that you must surrender your boundaries to demonstrate your love. But love should not require the destruction of your autonomy. You can love someone and still disagree with them. You can care about someone and still say no. You can appreciate what someone has done for you without becoming permanently indebted to them. Your kindness should never become a contract that gives another person control over your choices. Another important sign is when someone consistently changes the subject whenever you address their behavior. Instead of responding to what they did, they bring up your past mistakes. Instead of acknowledging your feelings, they accuse you of being difficult. Instead of discussing the problem, they make you defend your entire character. Suddenly, you are no longer talking about what happened. You are defending who you are. This can create confusion because the original issue disappears. You begin apologizing for things you did not even intend to discuss. When you notice this pattern, return to the specific behavior. What happened? How did it affect you? What boundary do you need? You do not need to win an argument. You need clarity. And clarity becomes difficult when you are constantly being pulled into emotional confusion. A strong boundary can be simple. You can say, I understand that you are upset, but I am still allowed to make this decision. Or, we can talk when we are both calm, but I will not continue a conversation based on insults or guilt. You are not responsible for preventing another person's disappointment. Someone can be disappointed with your boundary and still respect it. Someone can disagree with your decision and still love you. Someone can feel uncomfortable without having the right to control you. This is an important distinction because mature relationships make room for discomfort. Not every uncomfortable emotion needs to be eliminated immediately. Sometimes people become manipulative because they cannot tolerate hearing no. But their discomfort does not automatically become your responsibility. You can have compassion without surrendering your freedom. You can listen without obeying. You can understand someone's feelings without allowing those feelings to dictate your choices. The more clearly you understand this, the easier it becomes to recognize when emotional pressure is replacing genuine communication, and when you stop responding automatically to guilt, fear, or pressure. You begin creating space between someone else's reaction and your own decision. In that space, you can think clearly, listen to yourself, and choose your response instead of being pushed into it. Repeated dishonesty can quietly destroy even the strongest relationship, because trust is built through consistency, not promises. When someone repeatedly lies, hides important information, changes their story, or makes promises they have no intention of keeping, the damage goes deeper than the individual lie. You begin losing confidence in everything they say. A simple conversation becomes something you analyze. A promise becomes something you question. And eventually, you may find yourself searching for evidence instead of simply listening. One mistake does not automatically make someone dishonest. People can forget, misunderstand, or make poor decisions. What matters is the pattern and what happens when the truth comes to light. A person who genuinely values your trust will usually acknowledge what they did, accept responsibility, and make an effort to repair the damage. Someone who repeatedly lies may instead deny, minimize, blame you, or create another explanation to cover the first one. This is where you must learn to look beyond words. A person can say, "Trust me," 100 times, but trust is created by what they consistently do when nobody is forcing them to be honest. If their words and actions repeatedly contradict each other, pay attention. You should not have to become an investigator inside your own relationship. You should not feel that you need to check every detail, question every explanation, or constantly wonder whether there is another version of the story. When suspicion becomes a permanent part of your daily life, emotional peace becomes difficult to maintain. Repeated dishonesty also creates an unhealthy cycle. The person lies, you discover the truth, they apologize, you forgive them, and then the same behavior happens again. Over time, you may become attached to the apology rather than evaluating the behavior. You start believing that because they feel sorry afterward, the problem has been solved. But an apology without meaningful change does not rebuild trust. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. You can forgive someone for your own peace while still recognizing that their behavior has made them unsafe to trust deeply. Forgiveness does not require you to ignore evidence. Trust must be earned through consistent behavior over time. There is also a difference between privacy and deception. Everyone deserves personal space, and not every detail of someone's life must be shared. But deliberately creating false information to mislead you is different. Healthy privacy respects individuality. Repeated deception damages the foundation of connection. When trust has been broken, observe what happens next. Does the person become defensive? Do they attack you for asking reasonable questions? Do they accuse you of being controlling simply because you noticed inconsistencies? Or do they acknowledge the damage and become more transparent? Their response can tell you a great deal. You also need to avoid allowing one beautiful moment to erase a long pattern. Someone can be loving today and dishonest tomorrow. Someone can give you an emotional apology while continuing the same behavior privately. Do not judge trust by the intensity of a single moment. Judge it by consistency. A trustworthy person does not need to be perfect. They need to be willing to tell the truth, take responsibility, and correct their behavior when they make mistakes. And when those qualities repeatedly disappear, you have the right to reconsider how much trust and access you give that person. Humiliation is a form of disrespect that can leave a deeper impact than people realize. It happens when someone deliberately makes you feel small, embarrassed, exposed, or worthless, especially in front of other people. Sometimes it appears as an obvious insult, but often it is disguised as humor. Someone may reveal something personal about you, mock your appearance, imitate your mistakes, criticize your intelligence, or make you the target of jokes whenever other people are around. When you react, they may simply say, "I was only joking." But humor does not automatically make disrespect acceptable. There is a difference between laughing together and laughing at someone. In a healthy relationship, both people can joke with each other without deliberately attacking vulnerabilities. There is safety underneath the humor. You know that the other person is not trying to destroy your confidence or make you feel inferior. Public humiliation is different because it often has an audience. The person may behave as though your embarrassment is entertainment. They may exaggerate your mistakes so others can laugh. They may interrupt you repeatedly or dismiss your opinions in front of friends or family. They may bring up something you shared privately and turn it into a joke. When this happens repeatedly, do not ignore the pattern simply because everyone else is laughing. You know how the interaction made you feel. Perhaps you became quiet. Perhaps you smiled because you did not know how else to respond. Perhaps you laughed along while feeling hurt inside. Many people do this because they want to avoid making the situation uncomfortable. But hiding your pain does not make the behavior harmless. A person who genuinely respects you does not need to make you feel inferior to appear confident. They can disagree with you without humiliating you. They can correct you without attacking your character. They can joke with you without using your deepest insecurities as material. Pay attention to what happens when you tell someone that their behavior hurt you. This is often more revealing than the original incident. If they listen, understand, and change their behavior, there may be room for repair. But if they laugh at your feelings, accuse you of being too sensitive, or repeat the behavior intentionally, the issue becomes much clearer. You are allowed to take humiliation seriously. You do not need to wait until the behavior becomes extreme before recognizing that something is wrong. Repeated small acts of disrespect can gradually damage confidence. You may begin questioning your appearance, intelligence, abilities, or worth simply because someone repeatedly makes you feel inadequate. Do not give another person's jokes the authority to define you. At the same time, protecting your dignity does not require you to become aggressive. You can calmly say, "I don't appreciate being spoken to like that." You can change the subject. You can leave the conversation. You can create distance from someone who repeatedly turns your vulnerability into entertainment. Your response does not need to match their behavior. You do not have to humiliate them back to prove that you are strong. Real strength is being able to recognize disrespect without allowing it to transform you into someone you do not want to become. The people around you should be able to challenge you without destroying your dignity, laugh with you without making you the target, and know your weaknesses without using them against you. When those basic forms of respect disappear repeatedly, the relationship deserves careful examination. One of the most exhausting behaviors you can experience in a relationship is being around someone who refuses to take responsibility for anything they do. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone loses patience sometimes. Everyone says the wrong thing, makes poor decisions, or hurts someone unintentionally. What separates a mature person from an immature one is not the absence of mistakes, but the willingness to acknowledge them. A person who takes responsibility can say, "I was wrong." They can recognize the impact of their actions without immediately searching for someone else to blame. They understand that an explanation is not always an excuse. They may have been stressed, angry, disappointed, or afraid, but they can still recognize that their behavior was their responsibility. Someone who constantly avoids accountability operates differently. Whenever something goes wrong, there is always another reason. Their anger happened because you provoked them. Their lie happened because you asked too many questions. Their disrespect happened because you were difficult. Their broken promise happened because circumstances forced them to change their plans. Eventually, you may find yourself apologizing for things you did not cause. This is where the relationship becomes emotionally exhausting. Instead of solving the original problem, every conversation turns into an investigation of what you supposedly did wrong. You bring up their behavior, and suddenly your past mistakes become the topic. You say, "That hurt me," and they respond with, "Well, you hurt me last month." You ask for accountability, and they give you a list of your imperfections. Of course, your mistakes matter too. Healthy relationships require accountability from both people, but accountability cannot exist if every conversation becomes a competition over who is more guilty. A mature person can hold two truths at the same time. You made a mistake, and I made a mistake. An unhealthy dynamic often requires one person to carry all the blame. You should also watch for repeated promises without behavioral change. Someone may say, "I know I was wrong," but then continue doing the same thing. The words sound responsible, but the pattern remains unchanged. Real accountability eventually becomes visible through behavior. They become more careful. They communicate differently. They recognize triggers. They make an effort to repair damage. They stop expecting forgiveness to erase consequences. You cannot do this work for another person. You can explain your feelings clearly. You can communicate your boundaries. You can offer opportunities for repair. But you cannot force someone to develop self-awareness. Another important distinction is between understanding someone's past and excusing their present behavior. A difficult childhood, stressful circumstances, painful experiences, or personal struggles may help explain why someone behaves a certain way. Compassion allows you to understand that complexity, but understanding is not the same as permission. You can have compassion for someone's pain while still refusing to become the target of their harmful behavior. You can say, "I understand why you feel this way, but I will not accept being treated this way." That is not cruelty. That is clarity. If every conflict ends with you apologizing while the other person accepts no responsibility, pay attention to that pattern. Relationships become healthier when both people are capable of looking inward. You should not have to become responsible for another person's emotions, choices, reactions, and mistakes simply because they refuse to examine themselves. Their behavior belongs to them. Your response belongs to you. And your boundaries determine what you are willing to participate in. At some point, you have to stop asking yourself how much more you can tolerate and start asking yourself what kind of life you want to live. Because your life is not meant to be a constant negotiation with disrespect, manipulation, dishonesty, humiliation, broken boundaries, and people who refuse to take responsibility for their actions. You cannot control how other people behave. You cannot make someone respect you. You cannot force someone to become honest. You cannot make someone accept responsibility. But you can decide what you will continue to participate in. That decision is where your strength begins. Remember, setting boundaries does not mean you hate people. Walking away does not mean you are cruel. Protecting your peace does not mean you think you are better than others. It means you have finally understood that your life has value. There will always be people who misunderstand your boundaries. There will always be people who become angry when you stop giving them its unlimited access to you. There will always be people who benefit from your silence and become uncomfortable when you finally speak. Let them be uncomfortable. You are not responsible for making everyone comfortable with your self-respect. Sometimes growth means becoming less available to what constantly drains you. Sometimes maturity means accepting that an apology does not automatically restore trust. Sometimes wisdom means recognizing a pattern before it destroys your peace. And sometimes courage means walking away without receiving the explanation or closure you were hoping for. Do not wait until you completely lose yourself before deciding that something is unacceptable. Pay attention to the small signs. Pay attention to how you feel after conversations. Pay attention to whether you are becoming afraid to speak. Pay attention to whether you constantly question your worth. Pay attention to whether you are always apologizing while someone else never takes responsibility. These patterns